The camera's going to go live. We're going to do PMQs Unpacked live at midday. Lucy Fisher and Tim Shipman are going to be here. We'll pause the action. Live from the House of Commons is Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer go at it. So stay tuned for that. Go onto YouTube, search Times Radio, hit subscribe so you won't miss any more. There's loads of good stuff on there. Hundreds of thousands of people are on there. We'll bring you the action of the House of Commons live from midday. Before that, extraordinary story this. You remember we've talked a lot about the sub-postmasters scandal, the great post office scandal, in fact. As it was described by Nick Wallace in his book covering the extraordinary mess that unfolded in the post office system. Now, the company responsible for it has been handed another contract. Well, Nick Wallace joins me now. Morning, Nick.
Hello there, Matt.
Before we get into this latest decision, just explain for people who don't remember what happened in post offices using this equipment installed by Fujitsu.
Well, it was rolled out at the turn of the century to every single post office in the country by Fujitsu. It was designed, built and operated by Fujitsu as part of a PFI deal for the post office. And it took responsibility for accounting for the public money that went into each post office branch out of the hands of the sub-postmasters and into the hands of Fujitsu and the post office, whilst keeping the sub-postmasters legally responsible for it, which would have been fine if the IT system, the Horizon IT system, worked. But it didn't. It was fundamentally badly built. It had massive holes in it and it couldn't add up properly. And postmasters were held liable for these holes in their accounts, not just sacked and forced to pay back this money, but then prosecuted through the criminal courts, which has led to more than 700 people being wrongly prosecuted by the post office over this IT evidence.
And it had a terrible impact, didn't it, on those involved? Some people died without even knowing that they would eventually be cleared.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this destroyed families, destroyed the mental health of people, destroyed their reputations within the community. Because don't forget, postmasters are very visible people within their communities, but they're also very isolated as well. So for years, the post office was able to tell them that they were the only people having problems with this IT system. And because they were so geographically isolated from their fellow sub-postmasters. And it took a long, long time for them to band together and realize that the post office had basically been on this incredible prosecution spree over the course of a decade, putting people in prison on faulty evidence.
So the obvious thing to do, given all of that, the devastating impact that it's had, the obvious thing to do is to give the company responsible another contract.
Well, this is the thing. Fujitsu was not in a good way at the turn of this century. And the Horizon IT system was the golden goose. You could argue that Fujitsu's current position, which is one of considerable power and influence when it comes to supplying government with IT contracts, is entirely built on the foundation of Horizon. And when the post office realized that it had a serious problem with the Horizon system, it tried to get rid of Fujitsu. This was back in 2013, 2014. It actually tendered to replace the Horizon system with a new system and a new contractor. And IBM won the contract and a year later handed it back because it wasn't how the post office had spec'd it up and it was too complicated. So the post office had to go back to Fujitsu, who it had told it was going to take the contract away from them, and say, I'm sorry, lads, we need to extend this for a bit longer. And I'm sure Fujitsu would have said, well, of course, that's perfectly fine. We'll just have to double our prices. So Fujitsu have been milking this cash cow for years. And I think this latest delay to the replacement of the Horizon system is an indication of just how difficult these complex nationwide networked IT systems can be. But Fujitsu are milking this for everything that it's worth, and yet have not been held remotely responsible for this terrible miscarriage of justice, of which they are inherently part of.
Well, I mean, it's just the latest development. What is such a scandal, Nick. And you've done so much work uncovering it all. Nick, really good to speak to you. Thank you for that. That was Nick Wallace there, journalist and author of the Great Post Office Scandal, with the latest on that of handing a new contract to Fujitsu. It's absolutely incredible. We are counting down to midday. We are already live on the Times Radio YouTube channel. Get on live now. Who's first in this morning? Hi from sunny Taunton, says Stephen Bowadar. Says Heather. Oh, hello. Oh, that's Times Radio. Hello from a grey Leicester, says Stephen. Buenos dias from Uckfield, says Jonathan. We're getting ready for PMQs Unpacked. That's coming up in just a few minutes' time. Lara Spirit, Times Red Box reporter, is here. What do we think is going to happen, Lara?
Hi, Matt. So this is the first Starmer-Sunak head-to-head that we've had in a while, of course, because we had recess and then we had Angela Rayner versus Dominic Raab as well. So it's been a fair amount of time. I think it's very likely, we saw this morning Keir Starmer saying, not for the first time, that the NHS is broken, announcing the new figures they've seemed to dug up, which show that nearly 5 million people had to go to A&E rather than a GP appointment. So I think given that we see Starmer go quite heavily on public services in PMQs as part of his whole Britain is broken after 13 years of Tory rule, likely that we'll see something on that. Other fights going on, we could see something from the backbenchers on Northern Ireland. Of course, Chris Heaton-Harris, Northern Ireland Secretary, in a bit of a spat with Jeffrey Donaldson at the moment, the DUP leader, so that could come up as well. Small boats could also come up. We're waiting for a rebel showdown towards the end of the week as well. And then the inflation figures that we've seen, that might come up too. So I also think in terms of best of the rest, we'll see after. Very likely some SNP questions could be interesting today. It'll be very interesting, particularly not just to see what Stephen Flynn, who will of course be back as their Westminster leader, will ask, but actually how the government chooses to respond, because the evolving government line from Westminster on what's happening north of the border is particularly interesting and I think not firmly sketched out yet.
We've just had a newly published list of ministerial interests published, including it contains a reference to the childcare agency that Rishi Sunak's wife holds shares in. So was it about this time yesterday we heard that Rishi Sunak was being investigated by the Standards Commissioner over declarations of interest.
So Lindsay Hoyle has asked MPs not to raise this today in Prime Minister's question. So that would have been an obvious thing that we might have seen, was this delay. And of course, Number 10 have hit back quite firmly against accusations that this was kind of improperly declared, and have said that they're happy to sit down and explain why this happened in the way that it did. So I think unlikely that we might see that in Prime Minister's questions today. But often when Lindsay Hoyle points out that he might not want something to be raised, it actually ends up creating a lot more controversy around the issue itself rather than helping it go away. So that's definitely one to watch too.
So this new list that Sir Laurie Magnus, who's Rishi Sunak's ethics advisor, has said he is content that any actual potential and perceived conflict of interest involving ministers have been or are in the process of being resolved. And he says that this list of ministerial interests is not a complete register of all interests, because that would be too complicated. Instead, it just includes interests, including those of close family, which are or may be perceived to be directly relevant to a minister's ministerial responsibilities. But it's quite tough if you're the Prime Minister. Almost anything could fall under that.
Yeah, and I mean,
as we've seen, he announces a childcare package which would benefit a firm that his wife's got shares in.
Yeah, I mean, any Prime Minister, but I think particularly, as we know, Sunak is a very wealthy Prime Minister, and of course is married to a very wealthy woman too, with sweeping business interests, as Number 10 have alluded to in the past few days when this has been heating up as an issue. So I think you're right.
And what do we think about what Stephen Flynn will do? Because normally it's quite an easy hit from the SNP's perspective. But I do wonder if he might get slightly more. I mean, they shouted him quite a lot already, the Tory MPs, mainly because he puts his hands in his pockets.
Yeah. The Tory MPs probably will enjoy Stephen Flynn standing up today and trying to poke fun at Rishi Sunak. But, news that we've seen this morning that senior figures in the SNP have more or less accepted that they think Nicola Sturgeon will at some point be arrested, I think will leave Stephen Flynn feeling pretty exposed, given, former support for Nicola Sturgeon. So that will be particularly interesting to watch. I think less so his questions and more how the government responds to them.
And then you'll be back after 12:30 with the best of the rest.
The best of the rest.
Rounding up all of you. And then you'll be in everyone's inbox at
2:30.
Ish. Time subscribers can get the red box PMQs Unpacked email in your inboxes around 2:30, 3:30.
Enough.
Depends how boozy Lara's lunch is.
That's really unfair.
Time subscribers, just go, turn the microphone off. Time subscribers, go to thetimes.co.uk/redbox and subscribe right now. Right, coming up then, stand by your beds. It's PMQs Unpacked. Get on the YouTube channel. We will pause the action live from the House of Commons. We've got a special double bill. Oh, Tim Shipman, there he is, walking in front of the camera. And Lucy Fisher joining us live. We'll pause the action. It's next on Times Radio.
Across the UK, on DAB, online and on your smart speaker. This is Times Radio.
It's 12 o'clock. I'm Matt Chorley. This is Times Radio. In a moment, PMQs Unpacked. But first, a look at the headlines this lunchtime. A newly published list of ministerial interests contains a reference to the childcare agency that Rishi Sunak's wife holds shares in. It comes after the launch of a standards investigation into Rishi Sunak, which relates to a possible failure to declare an interest when first asked. The National Security Minister has warned the technological power of Russia, saying that energy and communications companies need to take cybersecurity seriously. Oliver Dowden said they are now seeking opportunities to compromise our critical national infrastructure. High food prices, particularly the essentials like bread, are one of the reasons that inflation is staying in double figures. It fell to 10.1% in March, which is a reduction on February, but not as much as economists had been expecting. NHS strikes have been announced at several ambulance trusts and hospitals in England. The date set is the 2nd of May. And the entertainer Barry Humphries, best known for his character Dame Edna Everage, is in a Sydney hospital surrounded by family after reportedly suffering serious health problems. The 89-year-old comedian recently underwent a hip replacement and was readmitted to hospital this week after suffering from complications. We'll have a full news roundup at past, but now live on Times Radio and on the Times Radio YouTube channel. It's time for this.
PMQs Unpacked on Times Radio. Unpacking the politics and cutting through the crossfire.
Yes, it's PMQs Unpacked. This week, we've got Tim Shipman here. Hello, Tim.
Hello.
And joining us on her last day at Times Radio Tower, so we're making her do some work, Lucy Fisher.
Wiping away a tear. Hello, Matt.
How are you?
I'm good.
Can I congratulate you on the cakes?
They are quite good, aren't they? If I'm allowed to pat myself on the back.
Did you make them?
I did not, which is why they're good. Yeah.
Have you had a cake yet, Tim?
Not yet, but
she's brought in cakes. Are they all gone?
They're all gone, but I've got an extra box for the afternoon team I work with.
Feels like
we'll have to have a chat about that.
Well, we are now in the afternoon, so I think we can probably raid those. What do we expect to come up today, Lucy, do you think?
Well, I think it's pretty inevitable that the ethics probe into Rishi Sunak is going to be something Keir Starmer will want to bring up, possibly as well the chatter about the report into Dominic Raab finally landing on the Prime Minister's desk either later this week or at the latest, we think, next week, might be something else that the Labour leader goes on.
It's been a while since it was about a month ago we were last here, Tim, with Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer in the Commons.
Yes, exactly. It's been a while, and be interesting to see. I mean, we're supposedly in the midst of a local election. I mean, not that you really know it, because most people aren't paying much attention to that. But Starmer's all over the front pages, going on about the NHS. So it's possible he'll do a bit of that. Cost of living as well.
Of course, the NHS famously run by local councils.
Well, indeed. But I too wonder whether he might toss in a bit of Raab, speculation that began in the Sunday Times, of course.
Oh yeah, of course.
The question I'd like to know.
Go on.
I wonder whether he'll ask it, is whether if Raab is found to have breached the rule, will he fire him or will he let him resign? Because he sacked Nadeem Zahawi.
Yeah.
Pretty sharpish, but Raab has been a close ally for a long time, and, you know...
Was Gavin Williamson sacked or was he allowed to resign?
Can't remember.
Good question. Not that it makes any difference because the material outcome is still
Sometimes
the same.
it can be a bit of both, can't it? He's allowed to resign, but allies of the Prime Minister make it known that he was ordered to go or
thank you for inviting me to resign. Yeah.
But there are different tones of letter and all that sort of thing, and
I
think probably it pays the PM to look pretty tough on this one. And clearly the conversations I've had are that that's what they're expecting to happen.
And do you think, how bad do you think the local elections might be for Rishi Sunak? I mean, the polls are narrowing a bit. Could we get there and it's not quite as bad as the sort of apocalyptic 1,000 seats lost?
Well, I've never thought it was going to be that bad because both parties performed fairly badly last time. They both got 28%. Starmer's obviously going to do a lot better than that. And you would imagine that Sunak potentially might do better than the nadir of Theresa May. So, CCHQ were absolutely delighted when somebody independent suggested they might lose 1,000 seats. I think they think they'll lose multiple hundreds, but anything that's sort of half that starts to look like a triumph.
I found Gavin Williamson's letter. I've therefore decided to step back from government.
Oh, well, that's not even resigning.
It's not even resigning.
It's just, naturally spending
he said
more
there have
time
been
with your
other
family.
allegations about my past conduct. I refute the characterisation of these claims, so he said they weren't true, but I recognise they're becoming a distraction. I've therefore decided to step back from government. So, yeah, that's even...
That sort of leaves it open to him stepping back in again at some point, doesn't it?
Stepping back again. Yeah. Right, here we go then. We are live on Times Radio, live on the Times Radio YouTube channel. Here we go with PMQs Unpacked. Question number 1 from Keir Starmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Tory party chair says that public services are in pretty good shape. Has the Prime Minister met a single member of the public who agrees with him?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker,
because of the record investment that we're putting into public services like the NHS, we're now getting waiting lists down. Because of the reforms that we've made to our education system, more children are studying in good and outstanding schools. Because that's what you get with a Conservative government: more funding, more reform, and better outcomes for Britain.
Oh, that was quite short and sweet. Lucy, here's an interesting question. Is Greg Hands any good at being the Tory party chair? Because he seemed to...
He's quite low profile, isn't he?
Low profile, but then they let him out on the telly at the weekend, and you wouldn't claim that all of it was a roaring success. They say that public services were in pretty good shape. He had some weird writing on his hands, like he was Noel Edmonds presenting Deal or No Deal.
He was wearing a green tie as well. I thought, was he, wondered if he was representing...
Not since David Cameron.
Yeah.
One of those.
Yeah.
I also think it's a slightly strange choice that he's party chairman, because it signals, that they are really looking at trying to defend in the blue wall, the prosperous sort of southern home county seats, the ring, the donut around London. He is the MP for Chelsea and Fulham. You can't get, a smarter set of postcodes in the country. And, he's a former banker. He's worked on trading floors in London and New York. He's a Cambridge University graduate. He literally is sort of metropolitan liberal elite. So interesting signalling that they've made him chairman.
But Lucy, are you forgetting the deputy chairman?
Well, I'm not.
Mr. Lee Anderson of Ashfield.
Once 30p Lee, now 100 grand Lee, appearing on GB News. What do you make of Greg Hands as an operator, Tim?
I think he's one of those old school types who's generally regarded as sort of sane and sensible and will keep central, casting on track. I mean, frankly, the chairman of the Conservative Party, the person who's in charge of the strategy, is Isaac Levito, who is the kind of the hired help, the guy doing the polling, the guy working on the messaging with his business partner, Michael Brooks. Those are the guys who are actually running the election campaign. And frankly, Greg Hands is there to keep the show on the road. But as you rightly observe, if you're just there to keep the show on the road, not, doing something in your underwear on the broadcasts would be kind of helpful.
Yeah. And he's still waving around the Liam Byrne note. That seems to be his thing. 7 times in 9 days he's brandished the I'm sorry, there's no money left.
Feels quite tired.
Feels a little bit tired.
Years ago.
Well, we'll see. Right, well, that was an eventful...
I mean, he's right. There's still no money left. But but there have been 13 years of Conservative government in the meantime, which even the average disconnected voter might have noticed.
But actually, Labour play the same game, harking back to the record of New Labour, which equally seems as distant.
Well, that makes a change, though, doesn't it? Because for about 5 years, they didn't acknowledge New Labour even existed. So.
Yeah, that's very true. Right, here we go. Then let's go back to back to the House of Commons. It's question number 2 from Keir Starmer.
He's living in another world to the rest of us. People waiting more than 2 days from an ambulance because they broke the NHS. Only 1 in 100 rapists going to court because they broke the criminal justice system. A record number of small boats crossing the Channel because they broke the asylum system. People can't afford their bills, can't get the police to investigate crimes, can't get a doctor's appointment. Does that really sound like pretty good shape to him?
Well, Mr. Speaker, what's the record since 2010? Since 2010, crime down by 50% under the Conservative government, Mr. Speaker. 20,000 more police officers, we've given them more powers, and we've toughened up sentencing, all opposed by Sir Softy over there.
Oh, dear.
Sir Softy? What the hell's that?
That's
it's
clearly a new
one of
one.
their latest ones, isn't it? I've read this somewhere. I've not actually yet been spun it myself. But,
Sir Softy?
It feels to me like one that's not going to endure, whereas Starmer talking about everything being broken is probably something that might endure.
They broke the NHS, they broke the criminal justice system, they broke the... That's
well, the first two, it seems to me, probably resonate with voters. I'm not sure he's going to get very far by suggesting the Tories broke the asylum system when they're the ones trying to basically bottle it up.
But one of the recurring themes, Lucy, of us doing PMQs probably over the last year, 18 months, is Labour struggling to get to the phrase which sums everything up. There was enough is enough that Angela Rayner was using quite a lot. Is it broke? You broke Britain. They're getting closer to something.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And there has been this criticism. Starmer himself has had 12 different slogans. Patrick Maguire amusingly rounded them all up in a recent column. When it comes to the Tories and the asylum system, they have stop the boats, one of these 3-word phrases like get Brexit done, take back control, which is very effective. Labour had a 5-point plan. So I think that they are, as you say, getting closer, and it feels like broken Britain is going to be what the kind of the tough attack line that Labour lands on will be. The question is whether that really aligns with how people feel in their daily life accessing public services. Do they think they're underfunded, need reform, or do people feel that things are fundamentally broken and they are therefore willing to have this leap of faith and change the government?
I'm still slightly reading from Sir Softy.
Yeah.
Versus Mr. Fix-It. I think that's what Number 10 are trying to push, Sunak as.
So Sunak's... It's interesting they're both then positioned themselves as Mr. Fix-It. Like, who is the most,
But this is the point, isn't it? They're very similar people. They're both technocrats. They're both people who like looking at a problem and finding a solution. And however long and however detailed they need to get into the weeds, they'll go and do it. And that's why... the Tories think they've got half a sniff because they can show that their guy's actually doing it if he does. And Starmer's goal is to show that nothing they're doing is working. And it's interesting because if you think back, about a year ago, you and I were encouraging... We were saying they didn't have a slogan, and some of the listeners got in touch.
Listeners are very good.
And what did we alight on? Something to do with Britain is broken. And here we are, months on, and that's where they've ended up.
Yeah.
Well done, listeners.
Well done, listeners. Put the Times Radio listeners in charge of the country. Terrifying prospect. Right, let's go back then. This is we go back to the House of Commons. This is question number 3 from Sir Softy.
Either the Prime Minister doesn't use the same public services to the rest of us, or he simply can't see the damage they've done to our country. In 2019, Ariel Lee, a convicted people smuggler, threw boiling water over a prison officer, leaving him with first-degree burns. The prison officer said it felt like acid. His face was on fire. His attacker was found guilty, received a prison sentence, quite right in my view. Does the Prime Minister agree?
Well, Mr. Speaker, while record is clear on sentencing, it was this party and this government that passed the Sentencing Act last year. It toughened up sentences, and the average custodial sentence has now increased since 2010 by almost 2/3. For child sex abusers, it's up by 15 months, and for rapists, it's up by 2 years. And when our Sentencing Act ended the automatic early release of offenders who pose a danger to the public, it was the Labour Party who voted against it.
He knows something's coming and he's not quite sure what it is.
Yes.
And he's getting all his sentencing lines out there. There's going to be a kicker in this case study. And Sunak doesn't quite know where it's coming from.
It's interesting that actually it makes these exchanges quite good. That they're both sort of on it now. So Starmer is much better than he was, Lucy.
Better. I think not as of sort of, Cameron was a lot better, wasn't he? I was struck, I think one of the ways in which Starmer's getting better and more political at these exchanges is where he said either the Prime Minister doesn't use the same public services as the rest of us. And of course he does, and he sends his kids to, the smartest sort of private school in the capital.
And it was quite subtle as well, wasn't it? He didn't put it on the nose, he just left it there so people could draw their own conclusion. We know that the Prime Minister doesn't use the same services, not in education and to a degree not in health either.
Yeah. And actually, sort of by dripping it, so by the time we get to the next election, if they go hard on it, it won't seem like it's come out of nowhere.
Yeah.
That actually, Britain is broken, and the Prime Minister doesn't even know because he's living in, was it a different country or a different planet?
Different planet. But he's in previous PMQs, he's trialled other lines, get out of Kensington, get out of Miami. Yeah. He's out of touch. It is this picture he's painting of sort of global elite.
Citizen of nowhere.
Citizen of nowhere.
Someone on the YouTube channel just said, what was the point of that question? And somebody else said, seriously, give it to Angie for the rest of the season. So, Starmer's not going down there.
Well, I think we're about to find out what the point of it was with the follow-up.
Very good. Let's go back to the House of Commons. Question number 4 from Keir Starmer.
Well, the problem is, Prime Minister, Ariel Lee's sentence ended up being suspended. And anyone watching this would wonder why someone who violently attacks a key worker isn't behind bars. Well, the court judgment spelt it out. It's because it took 16 months for the attacker to be charged. That's ridiculous. And it took another 2 years before he was sentenced. Completely unacceptable. Can't the Prime Minister see that because they've lost control of the court service, because they've created the largest court backlog on record, he's letting violent criminals go free.
There we go then.
There we are. So that was the question. That was the thing he was driving at. The reason that Rishi Sunak danced around it so much was because the guy who was attacked someone with boiling water ends up having his sentence suspended. Let's hear what Rishi Sunak's now got to say about that.
Mr. Speaker, here's the record. We're cracking down on grooming gangs, and he's uncomfortable, Mr. Speaker. He's uncomfortable addressing. We toughen the law on sex offenders so they spend longer in prison. He voted against it, Mr. Speaker. And we've increased rape convictions by over 60%. Meanwhile, he attended 21 sentencing council meetings that watered down punishments. That's why they call him Sir Softy. Soft on crime, soft on criminals.
No, nobody calls him Sir Softy.
They call him Sir
That's
Softy.
why the people that were in my meeting this morning.
Yeah, it's like when journalists say something was quickly dubbed something, which means that they've quickly dubbed it themselves.
A Westminster wag, a
Westminster
colleague next
wag.
to them.
I've stopped using Westminster wag, but yeah, I just sort of...
It's rubbish.
It is rubbish.
My favourite Westminster wag, very long time ago, Mail on Sunday, there was somebody who worked in the canteen in Parliament was said to be going out with an MP, which was somebody said was a bit like the plot of Love Actually, where obviously the tea lady goes out with the Prime Minister. And she'd been dubbed by a Westminster wag Martine McCutlery.
Oh, God, that is...
I mean,
that
I quite
is
like
terrible.
That. Oh, no, that's all right. It's so bad it's good, that one.
It's my favourite thing. Anyway,
quickly dubbed by a Westminster wag.
By a Westminster wag, Sir Softy.
Yeah.
Well, Rishi Sunak just did what he could only do in that situation, which is completely ignore what Keir
Ignore
Starmer
it
said.
and say, well, you're soft on all this other stuff.
Yeah, here's some other things, loosely, the sort of criminal justice area. There we are. Right, let us know what you think. Who's winning this one? Post it on the YouTube channel comments. Let's go back to the Commons question number 5 from Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, I've prosecuted thousands upon thousands of sex offenders. He's just shown he doesn't understand how the criminal justice system works. No wonder he can't fix it. And he thinks that cracking down on crime is suspending a sentence where someone should be in prison. That shows the problem. Yep. And another reason, Mr. Speaker, another reason cited by the court for suspending the sentence in Ariel Lee's case was a letter from the Justice Secretary in February about prison overcrowding. As a result of that letter, courts have been told to have awareness of the impact of current prison population levels when passing sentences. In simple terms, the wrecking ball the Tories have taken to criminal justice means that thousands of people who should be in prison aren't. The court also said, he shakes his head, he should read the judgment. The court also said that it's for the government to say when prison conditions return to a more normal state. Now, I know the Justice Secretary has been busy trying to save his own job rather than actually doing it.
Dominic Raab.
But has the Prime Minister asked him when he's going to get a grip on the prison system and withdraw that letter which is allowing criminals to walk free?
Mr. Speaker, we're in the process of building 20,000 more prison places. That's what this government is delivering, because we're toughening up sentencing and putting more people behind bars and making sure that our most serious offenders spend longer there. But I love it when he talks about his record as a lefty lawyer, Mr. Speaker, because I was looking at this, because when he was there, I read, he's quoting things, I read that people were really disappointed that his organisation let down victims. That wasn't even my assessment. That was his shadow Attorney General.
Oh, there we are.
I'm interested there in this argument about Starmer's reputation as Director of Public Prosecutions. I spoke to a senior Tory figure lately who sort of scoffed to me. Starmer's doing his best to try and make it a thing, but the public have never heard of DPP, the vast majority. They don't understand what it is. And I can understand why he's trying to play it up. He wants to also make clear that his knighthood has been awarded as a result of merit, because he held this big public appointment rather than being some kind of hereditary baronetcy. But again, that's another reason why he also talks about his father having been, a tool maker. He's come, from the sort of lower middle classes and done well. Whereas I think focus groups that the Tories are running show that people think he's a posho and that he's a sir because he's been very privileged.
Which is why they stick sir in every single press release that they ever put out.
And now Sir Softy.
Yes, well, quite. I mean,
is it trending on Twitter yet?
Well, he's obviously been honoured for being so soft. I mean, it's amazing. That was a real sort of treat of a question though from Starmer. I thought if we look past sentence, which was my highlight. Going straight for Raab on overcrowding,
so the point he's making is
that
Dominic Raab has written a letter in his position as Justice Secretary telling judges to take into account when sentencing, basically the fact that the prisons are full.
Yeah.
So maybe...
And you can well imagine a world in which the left would say, well, how dare you keep putting people in these overcrowded prisons? It's all terrible. But, the second you say don't jail people because there aren't any spaces.
Just bear in mind, we haven't got much space when you're sentencing people, is essentially the thing that Dominic Raab sitting right next to Rishi Sunak with...
There's a lot of yelling and nodding.
Suella Braverman on the other side laughing a lot.
Both of them very vocal. And then read the judgment. That was the other bit, What do you mean, man? You've not been in the detail and read the judgment like I have. There's a real kind of nerd off.
And that bit at the end about the Shadow Attorney General, is that referring to... Is that Emily Thornberry, is he saying, that said something disparaging?
Well, this would appear to be some clever research by the Tory party where one of his frontbenchers has been disparaging about the job that he did that we've already said that nobody knew he did. Yeah. And then he didn't say who it was, when it was... and a bit of research appears to have gone slightly to waste.
Some poor monkey in the Tory HQ spent weeks finding that. Finally found it, and Sunak's fluffed it.
Well, I mean, given the thin ice he's on, we'll probably hear it again next week.
Yeah, you might be right. Have another go at it. Well, let's go back then. Let's round this one off. This is question number 6 from Keir Starmer.
Well, Mr. Speaker, when I was in office as Director of Public Prosecutions, those benches migrated supporters. In 2013, the Home Affairs Select Committee said, we would like to commend the work of the Director of Public Prosecutions, Keir Starmer. He's striven to improve the treatment of sexual assault. They go on to say...
Lindsay Hoyle's up.
Can we... Prime Minister's questions matter to our constituents.
Do they?
I wonder if it's not the day. I want to get through it because I'm trying to help the Prime Minister and the Leader. You're not being helpful. We'll hear this question no matter how long it takes. Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, this is 2030.
Order. Ms Stevenson, I've heard...
Nice. Andrew Stevenson.
I've heard a few weeks. This is the last week. I suggest you quiet, or it's better you leave. Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, this is the Home Affairs Select Committee in 2013. They go on to say the work I did should provide a model to other agencies, and when he leaves the CPS, he will be missed. Now, that report was presented to Parliament by the then Home Secretary, future Prime Minister, the right honourable member for Maidenhead.
Theresa May.
And the government, those benches, noted and supported it. Now, it's obviously always a good look to have your work recognised, although they did lay it on a bit thick. So perhaps the Prime Minister will spend less time trying to rewrite history and more time sorting out the mess he's made of criminal justice. Because the crisis in criminal justice is just a snapshot of public services collapsing under his watch. People can see it wherever they look. Our roads, our trains, the NHS, the asylum system, policing, mental health provision. The Tories have broken them all they've got left is excuses and blame. Now, I know the Prime Minister would rather talk about a maths lesson than the state of the country, but perhaps he could solve this equation. Why, after 13 years of a Tory government, are patients waiting longer than ever, criminals walking free, growth non-existent, and why, everywhere you look, does nothing seem to work at all?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I can't quite remember, but I think he started by talking about when he was DPP in 2013. I'm actually glad he brought that up, because there was something else that happened when he was DPP in 2013, and that was That was when he got his own special law, Mr. Speaker. I've got it right here. It's the pensions increase. It's the pensions increase for Keir Starmer.
Oh, Lindsay Hall's up again.
Just a moment. Can I just say, order. I expect both sides to listen to the questions and the answers. Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, here it is. It's the pensions increase pension scheme for Keir Starmer, QC, 2013. Now, while we're introducing a transformative policy to support doctors to cut the waiting list faster, he wants to raise taxes on public sector workers. And it's one law for him and tax rises for everyone else.
Wow. There was quite a lot to unpack there.
Yeah.
Where should we... Let's go all the way back. Now, it's quite a good bit of research. I think you could have possibly used it in question 5 rather than question 6. Keir Starmer digging out a Home Affairs...
I see your research and I raise it.
Yeah, digging out a Home Affairs Select Committee report praising his work as Director of Public Prosecutions.
Yes, which he did with... well, they did lay it on a bit thick in a kind of... Oh, not me, surely. Humble brag.
Saying that he will be missed. And then, Lucy, we got into, again, that trying to tie this idea of everything's broken, roads, the trains, the NHS, the asylum system, policing, mental health, they've broken them all.
Yeah. I think we've skipped around on a lot of subjects, or Starmer and Sunak have this PMQs, but the cut-through does seem to be using criminal justice as a vignette for wider problems in public services. One thing I'm interested in, and, Tim, you point out rightly that, Sunak and Starmer are fairly similar. They are the grey bureaucrats who sort of want to come up with technocratic solutions to issues. One area in which they're also sort of they're very similar on is crime, this tough on crime. And in a way, I'm detecting a lot of sort of concern in Labour circles that Starmer isn't doing enough on the sort of tough on the causes of crime, tackling inequality in the policy platform he's putting forward. So clearly he thinks it's a good strategy to try and win over swing voters ahead of the next election. But there is the risk of part of the left-wing kind of cohort that would ordinarily support Labour potentially flaking off or being kind of liable to abstain if he doesn't sort of do enough to really show how he will stop people. You can't just say we'll throw them all in jail because, as has been pointed out, the jails are full.
Yeah. The other thing about both of them trying to be tough on crime, it doesn't seem very authentic with either of them in a way that...
hang him and flog him, sort of Suella Braverman.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But I think that's what's interesting about this as an issue, in a sense. It's a win-win for both of them, really. The communities that are the victims of crime are disproportionately the ones that they're trying to attract. In the Tory case, trying to hang on to those red wall seats that they won in 2019, and Labour trying to get some of them back. And I think there isn't a great deal of constituency anywhere in British politics at the moment for that kind of bleeding heart approach to rehabilitation and all the rest of it. But Lucy's right. The one place it does exist is on the sort of centre-left of the Labour Party, and Starmer runs a little bit of a risk in terms of his internal management, I suspect, on that. But I think in terms of outward looking for voters, he's probably got it about right. They are trying, he then had to go at Sunak about, solve this equation, you maths geek. It's like, we're both geeks, but you're a bigger geek than I am.
And this because of his re-announcement this week of maths.
Exactly.
Well, I was there and I felt there was a sort of quite a lot of kind of consternation that we'd all been dragged, albeit to lovely Highbury Fields in Islington on a sunny morning, but no new detail. And afterwards, as the sort of journalists haggled round to sort of discuss any news lines, the only verdict was really that he seems to be dyeing his hair, Sunak. So, which I think he is. It's still a little grey on the temples, but it's looking a lot darker on top.
Speaking of geeks, I've now been informed via message that Greg Hans, who we were mildly disparaging earlier, can speak 3 languages. Now, I know he's fluent in German. The kicker to this is that the message says, sad that his English isn't very good.
It's good with colleagues like that who... What else do you possibly want? The other thing they could both probably do with stopping is the thing. They're both doing the sort of half. Some people have commented on the YouTube thing. The sort of half laugh when they're getting to the joke.
I don't think Sunak's aided by having Braverman next to him. She's appears to be wearing some stolen crown jewels around her neck, but she's also finding everything sort of deeply amusing, which is probably rubbing off on the Prime Minister.
Maybe she's wearing all the stuff that they're not going to use at the coronation because it's woke people have told them they can't use it. She's going to wear it all.
I think on the whole, that was quite a good session for Starmer. He got over his decent message. I don't quite know why we had two perorations. There was there was a build-up of that sort of role of everything that was going wrong and was broken, and he did it twice. Sunak's response, though, one small little thing, but the line, one law for him and one for everybody else. That's the kind of silly little thing that will cut through with voters. Oh, this fella even got his own law to get his pension up. It's kind of irrelevant to the big thing, but it's the sort of thing that sticks and just niggles away in people's minds.
Or at the very least, just sort of it paints it. It's interesting how he ends up becoming part of the establishment. He's not a new figure. He's the same as the rest of them.
Yeah.
He's, it sort of tarnishes him a bit,
and it ruins the sort of change argument that Labour would want to have.
I do think Sunak leaves himself open to, the same argument himself. Tax loopholes around non-doms apply to virtually no one, but of course, his wife. So I suspect Labour might try and throw that line back at him. Just as an addendum, can I say I was pleased today that there was sort of a bit more rowdiness on the back benches. It sort of depresses me when the mood is fairly staid. So I know it's always said that the public don't like jeering and booing and whatnot.
This is not for the public.
But I personally very much like the liveliness.
Well, that brings us to the end of PMQs. Are you going to stick around for the best of the rest? We can fit Lara in as well, can't we? Yeah, it'll be fine. So Lucy Fisher's here. We've got a little gift for you, though, as a parting gift, Lucy. A message from John in Sheffield about his peevish and smug 20 minutes of broadcasting I've heard for a very long time. John is a regular complainer. I don't know why he listens. There are other radio stations you can listen to, but John in Sheffield, always lovely to have you with us. Lara Spirit has been watching the best of the rest, so we'll round those up next after we get the latest news from Rachel Jewell.
Across the UK, on DAB, online and on your smart speaker. This is Times Radio.
Thanks, Matt. Good afternoon. Sir Keir Starmer and the Prime Minister have clashed in the Commons on the state of public services. The Labour leader says Rishi Sunak is living in another world.
People waiting more than 2 days from an ambulance because they broke the NHS. Only 1 in 100 rapists going to court because they broke the criminal justice system. A record number of small boats crossing the Channel because they broke the asylum system. People can't afford their bills, can't get the police to investigate crimes.
Well, the Prime Minister hit back, saying the Tories are about more reform and better outcomes for Britain.
Since 2010, crime down by 50% under the Conservative government, Mr. Speaker. 20,000 more police officers, we've given them more powers, and we've toughened up sentencing, all opposed by Sir Softy over there.
Meanwhile, a fresh list of ministers' financial interests has been published this afternoon, which includes details on an investment which triggered an investigation into the Prime Minister. The document references shares in a childcare company owned by Rishi Sunak's wife, but doesn't say when that was registered. High food prices, particularly the essentials like bread, are one of the reasons inflation's staying in double figures. It fell to 10.1% in March, which is a reduction on February, but not as much as economists had been expecting. The experts also think another interest rate rise is now inevitable. Additional NHS strikes have been announced at several ambulance trusts and hospitals in England. The date set is the 2nd of May. Dry for most this afternoon with the best of the sunshine across the north and east of the UK. There is a keen easterly breeze, so the best of the temperatures in the west. Toby Gillis has the sports.
A former Football League manager found guilty of using racist language has had his ban from the sport extended to the longest punishment ever meted out for discrimination. It follows a Football Association appeal into former Chorley manager John Yems's case. Times Radio's Nick Ellaby reports.
An independent regulatory commission initially suspended Yems from football until June 2024, a 17-month ban. The written ruling controversially claims he was not a conscious racist. In extending Yems's ban to January 2026, the appeal board said that suggestion is untenable. The Football Associations hailed the outcome, saying it strongly disagreed with the original sanction, as there were numerous examples of inherent and obvious racist language.
Damar Hamlin, the American footballer who suffered a cardiac arrest during a match 4 months ago, says he does intend to return to the pro game. The 25-year-old has been cleared to play again despite having had to be resuscitated on the field on January the 2nd. The Buffalo Bills man insists he's confident he can be an effective player again.
I've been on a journey and I've seen, some of the top professionals across the country. Their answers to me were pretty much all the same. This event was life-changing, but it's not the end of my story.
And the countdown to this summer's Ashes has begun in earnest, with Australia naming their squad for the first 2 tests. It begins on June the 16th at Edgbaston, but Australia also have a test match in the UK before then, the World Test Championship final against India, hence the early squad declaration. It surprisingly includes veteran batter David Warner. The legendary 36-year-old's form has fallen off a cliff. He averaged just 9.5 with the bat during the Ashes in 2019, but he's been given a final chance to prove himself before the Tour of England, after which it's expected he'll retire. You can read more on these stories on the Times website or app.
This is Times Radio.
30 years ago, I started as a personal trainer, giving my clients proper plans with clear, achievable goals. Now I own 5 gyms, and I need a proper financial plan with clear, achievable goals. One of my clients recommended the people at NetWealth. The modern wealth management company who've just launched My Net Wealth. It's an online dashboard that brings all my savings and investments together, so I get a clear view of where my finances are right now. It also helps me work out where they could go. Talking of working out.
For a clear view of your finances, go to netwealth.com. Wealth management as it should be when investing your capital is at risk.
Protect your business from even the most advanced digital threats with technology you can rely on. ESET Digital Security. Progress protected.
John Pienaar at Drive. This afternoon from 5 on Times Radio.
Matt Chorley on Times Radio with NetWealth. Try the free digital dashboard that helps you track, plan and invest your wealth. Go to netwealth.com.
Jane Garvey and Fee Glover on Times Radio. Prepare for a lively mix of illuminating conversation.
I'm going to make the most of every single story that we have about Rod Stewart in what I hope is another 30 years of Rod Stewart on the planet, because I love him, Jane.
And the views that need to be heard.
Rod Stewart and beautiful wife Penny Lancaster. They're my royalty, those two. I absolutely love them both. You'll be saying that on Coronation morning, will you?
Jane Garvey and Fee Glover. This afternoon from 3 on Times Radio. Times Radio with Matt Chorley.
Very good afternoon to you. It's Matt Chorley on Times Radio with a packed newsroom. Studio, even. We've got Tim Shipman, Chief Political Commentator for the Sunday Times. Hello, Tim.
Hello.
Lucy Fisher, outgoing Chief Political Commentator for Times Radio. And now joining us, Lara Spirit, Times Red Box reporter, has been watching the rest of PMQ, so we don't have to.
Can I ask, Matt, with Lara's addition, does that up the smug quota?
I don't know, John in Sheffield, if you want to get in touch. John's not happy about his penis smug 20 minutes of broadcasting I've heard.
I mean, it may be that the more people talking means less Matt, which may mean less smug.
I'm getting smug vibes.
You think it's just me?
I'm not saying it's just you, but I'm saying, it's not.
I bet John's
not you, is it?
John's hating this. Us having a conversation.
He's very smug. It's even talking about it.
He's very smug. Us smugly talking about how smug we are.
Smug Shipman talking to that smug Chorley.
87222. Start your message when you want to get in touch. Start your message with the word smug. Lara, where are we going first?
We're going, predictably, to Stephen Flynn, the
SNP's
Westminster leader, who actually quite a rare show of humility today. I think how could it be otherwise, but seemed to kind of implicitly accept that his party and general wills for independence were in chaos. But listen to this question, because I think more interesting, as we spoke before, about the government's response to this. Rishi Sunak holding firm, as ministers privately say, to this idea that they don't want to get embroiled in making fun of the chaos in Scotland. They would much rather hold firm and seek to explain why actually the government in Westminster is doing quite a bit for them.
Well, let's take a listen. This is Stephen Flynn.
Boisterous.
As I said, I really do want to try and help the Prime Minister. If you don't, I do. Stephen Flynn.
Mr. Speaker, I'm delighted to hear that they had an equally peaceful and relaxing Easter break as I did. Prime Minister.
One person clapping.
Their refusal to stand alongside striking workers on the picket line, their acceptance of the economic damage being caused by Brexit, or perhaps their support for denying the people of Scotland the right to choose their own future, which led to the leader of the Scottish Conservative Party urging voters to back Labour.
Well, Mr. Speaker, what we're doing is not getting distracted by the things that are going on elsewhere, and we're focused on delivering for the people of Scotland. We're making sure that we fund public services well with £1.5 billion extra in Barnett consequentials. We're making sure that we provide support with the cost of living. Now, I know, Mr. Speaker, at the moment, him and his party are focused on other matters. We're just gonna motor on with the job.
Is that a motorhome joke?
I think it must be. I liked the bit where he said, we're not focusing on anything else.
No.
Initially, you sort of think, oh, yeah, there were SNP problems.
Yeah.
But actually, of course, what the Prime Minister's not focusing on is the stupid things his leader in Scotland's been saying.
Which was his Douglas Ross and...
Exactly.
Yeah. And posing the idea...
Tactically vote for Labour.
Yeah.
Keep these wicked SNP people out. I think a lot of Tories in the South would think it might be rather better if people voted for the SNP and stopped Labour getting somewhere near to a parliamentary majority. But there we go.
Yeah, actively encouraging lots of people to switch to Labour in Scotland is probably not of much help to the Conservatives.
But Douglas Ross has form on this, doesn't he? He's become a real thorn in the side for successive Tory prime ministers. And I think it seems he's made up his mind that the thing that matters more to him than party loyalty or the success of the party centrally down in Westminster is unionism. So I think he probably does mean what he says. He would prefer people should back Labour, a unionist party, and see Keir Starmer get into office than see, the cause of independence
But if
advanced.
politicians went round saying what they actually think about things all the time, where were they going to...
Well, it's great. It keeps us in business, doesn't it? I'm not complaining.
Where are we going next, Lara?
We're going to the Tory backbencher Chris Clarkson, who asked a question regarding this policy mooted in Wales that young asylum seekers could be handed £1,600 to help them with living costs. He was interesting in this respect because it listens like one of those questions that's possibly a plant where Rishi Sunak has given ample opportunity to disavow this policy and particularly to try and associate this policy with Keir Starmer, who has, of course, previously spoken highly of the Welsh Government. So take a listen.
Let's take a listen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's been reported that the Welsh Labour Government is going to incentivise people smugglers by offering £1,600 of taxpayers' money every month to asylum seekers. Can I ask my right honourable friend for an assurance that he will never contemplate such a daft idea in our small boats bill?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I know my noble friend Lord Bellamy and the Secretary of State for Wales wrote to the Welsh Government yesterday confirming that we would not be undertaking their request. Now, I know that the Labour leader has said that the Welsh Labour Government is his blueprint. And unbelievably, as my honourable friend said, Labour in Wales are trying to pay illegal migrants £1,600. Mr. Speaker, we're stopping the boats. Labour's paying for them.
We're stopping the boats, Lucy. Even though the figures yesterday showed we'd already breached 5,000 for this year.
Yeah, quite.
50,000 even. Yeah.
Well, absolutely. And today, of course, the government facing a headache with Braintree Council, District Council in Essex, bringing a High Court challenge against the first of its sites to house migrants to detain them. So, I mean, the government's policy is in complete disarray, many more legal challenges on the way. And, of course, a growing rebellion with up to 60 Tory MPs threatening to revolt on the illegal migration bill when it comes back to the Commons next week.
But the thing about Wales and Labour and the fact that Keir Starmer's on the record of court as saying it's his blueprint, is that a problem, do you think, too?
I think it's generally a good scoring point in the chamber, and the Tory backbenchers tend to like that. I'm not sure it cuts through with the public, who, if you're in England, you barely know where Wales is a lot of the time. I mean, most people in England would visit France or the United States more often than they would visit Wales. So I'm not sure it's quite the kind of selling point that the Tories always think it seems to be.
I'm not commenting because I've got into enough trouble with our good listeners in Wales this week. I have to try to pronounce the new name for the Brecon Beacon.
Go on, give it another shot.
No, I'm not. It was made worse by Rachel Sylvester saying she wasn't going to call it blah, 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 blah. Anyway, we won't get bogged down in that. Email Rachel Sylvester directly with any comments about that. Lara,
It's John from Sheffield.
Lara, have you got any more for us?
I have got one more frequent show in Prime Minister's Questions. Rosie Duffield, of course, Labour MP, who is well-known activist on trans rights issues. She speaks up about new figures from the Women's Rights Network about sexual assaults in hospitals. Implicit here is this question of whether or not the legal definition of biological sex will be changed, as we found out it might possibly in previous weeks. Rishi Sunak, in his response, indicating that he's well aware that Rosie Duffield will be watching that closely, so I think worth listening to.
Let's take a listen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This week, the Women's Rights Network published a report by criminologist Professor Joe Phoenix called When We Are at Our Most Vulnerable, revealing that between January 2019 and October 2022, which includes the pandemic lockdown, of course, there were a staggering 6,539 reported rapes and sexual assaults in UK hospital settings. That's an average of 33 incidents every single week. And as 8 police forces did not provide any data, the real figures are bound to be significantly higher. What can the Prime Minister and his government do to ensure that all women, staff, patients, stay in hospitals?
Yeah, can I first of all say I was deeply shocked, like the Right Honourable Lady, and appalled to hear about the cases of sexual assault and abuse in the NHS, and I pay tribute to her for her long-standing campaign on these issues. NHS organisations are responsible for protecting their staff and patients from sexual harassment and conduct. They've recently established a domestic abuse and sexual violence programme to build more robust safeguarding processes for protecting patients. We will work very closely with them to ensure that that is implemented, and I know she will hold us to account for doing that.
Tim, is interesting because Rosie Duffield is sort of treated by Rishi Sunak as one of his quite a lot of the time.
Well, nearly. I mean, the loose translation of everything he's just said is I take everything that the Right Honourable Lady has said very seriously, and I hope she continues to seriously consider defecting to the Conservative Party.
You'd be quite a bold person who would do that at this stage of the electoral cycle, Lucy.
Yeah, I think she has now ruled it out on record, hasn't she? There was a time when she was
plans
sort of
to.
umming and ahhing. But you would think maybe she would have gone for it. I mean, she's withstood a lot of abuse, and she's represents Canterbury, a seat with a lot of students, a lot of quite kind of radical activists on the left who feel very strongly in opposition to her stance on the trans question.
And I think she thinks it's better to stay and win the argument in her own party, frankly, than what do you achieve by changing parties, apart from probably losing your seat. But,
well, there is that. I mean, maybe if the Tories were 20 points ahead in the polls, it might be a slightly different calculation.
Yeah, but I think, there is a balance of opinion in the Labour Party now, which is a little bit different from what it was 6 months ago. I think a lot of people would be sceptical that Starmer's quite found the answer yet that satisfies everybody.
But he's moved closer.
But he has moved closer to where she is, partly as a result of what she's been doing.
Well, that brings us to the end of that. Thank you for that, Lara. What time can people expect your email in their inbox?
Well, I said 2:30 earlier, but you said it wouldn't be then. So
well, let's aim for 2:30, and if it's 3 o'clock, then so be it.
So be it.
How's that?
Thank you.
Times subscribers, go to thetimes.co.uk/red box. You get Lara in your inbox. Thank you, Lucy. Lucy, our last time on, well, we might get you back at some point. Your last time on air, and someone's been in touch with something nice. Clarissa says, farewell to Lucy Fisher. It's been informative, measured and professional. Good contacts, great insights, also one of the smoothest voices on any radio station. Good luck and thank you, Lucy. So there we are.
Oh, fantastic. And my mum's name is not Clarissa, so that might be a genuine stranger, so thank you.
I think John in Sheffield has actually just turned the radio off, so he's far too much smart. Lovely to see you. Good to see you, Lara. Nice to see you, Tim. Nice to see everyone. Nice to see everyone watching along on the YouTube channel as well. Up next, we're going to talk about the battle to save sausage rolls in Westminster, and we'll do the quiz. It's Matt Chorley on Times Radio with Net Wealth. For a clear review of your financial world, go to netwealth.com.
Kate Borsay, tonight from 8 on Times Radio.
We'll speak to the director of a documentary about documentary subjects. Its producer, Margaret Ratcliffe, also joins us. She's the daughter of Michael Peterson and featured in The Staircase, made as her dad was convicted of murder.